All right, I'm just going to move you guys over here. All right, so I will kind of keep an eye on the chat. So if anybody does have any questions, feel free to post them there. Otherwise, you're also more than welcome to unmute yourself and ask your question live. And then we will have time at the end for Q&A as well. So the purpose of today is to talk about something that has got a lot of traction in the last couple of months. Now, this is something that we all saw coming for a while, but it has just really taken off. And that's why we're so excited to talk to you guys about it and to show you how it can help your business. Just a quick little background on Paragus for anybody who's not familiar with our company. We are about a 50-person IT firm located in Hadley, Massachusetts. We service small businesses all over the Pioneer Valley and beyond. And in most cases, we help clients either take over their entire IT department or supplement what they have in-house to make sure that everything and anything IT related is ultimately being taken care of. To that end, we are an employee-owned company, which means that everyone you work with here is a part owner of the company and has a vested interest in how everything here works out and goes. Our core purpose, as we like to describe it to our clients and potential clients, is this idea of making IT fun. What we mean by that is we really want to go out of our way to make the experience of technology as easy, as seamless, and as fun as possible. And that's a great part of what we're going to be talking about today. There's nothing people hate more than doing manual, mundane tasks. They also are prone for error, and they are the least likely to get done when people get busy. So some of the things we're going to be looking at today is how we can use automation to make IT more fun and make things happen in the background, as even do some really cool stuff, which we'll show you a little bit later in the presentation. And then just by way of a little bit of introduction, for a long time, this is what Paragus has looked like. We've had this concept of these three pillars of IT: these strategic services, proactive services, and reactive services. These have served us well, and this is what we have always believed to be the three absolutely critical parts of providing IT service to small businesses. However, the fourth industrial revolution is picking up a lot of speed, and as a result, we've realized we missed something. If you think about all of these things that are happening, all of these things that are impacting and changing technology and the way that we interact with it, there's kind of this missing element that we discovered. And for us, that has a lot to do with these types of things. I'm not going to dig into each one of these. We have a whole separate presentation where we do talk more about some of these technologies. But as you can see, there's a lot happening right now that doesn't neatly fit into the box of either strategic, proactive, or reactive. So with all of these changes, everything happening, everything going on, we decided that there was this need for automation, this idea where our technology was going to start to talk to our other technology and enable our companies and our employees to be able to be more efficient, more successful, work from different places, use different tools, and take less time that is manually being put in and invest that time in things that have a higher and best use case. Creative functions, customer service, providing experiences, and less time doing mundane, boring tasks. So as we took all of that into kind of consideration, that is why we decided to announce the fourth pillar of IT that we are calling automation. And so going forward, this is what our approach is going to be. We have our on-demand support, which is where the reactive services used to be. We have security and compliance, which has taken over what we used to think of as proactive. We have our strategic planning services, and now we have an entire department dedicated to business automation. And that's what we're going to be spending the rest of today talking about and taking a look at. So while not limited exclusively to Microsoft 365, there's no question that 365 has been a huge genesis for this automation focus. And the reason is as more and more of our businesses utilize 365 technology, either for our email, our document sharing, our collaboration, our communication, what that enables us to do is start to create linkages that exist between those different programs and applications. And if it was still that all of our data was on our local servers in our building and our email was on some server in a closet, some of what we're talking about today, in fact, a lot of what we're talking about today wouldn't have been possible. What is making a lot of this possible is the fact that so many businesses and organizations have started to centralize their data. And it's not to say that there aren't other automation platforms and tools out there. There are. And it's not to say that you have to be using Microsoft in order to take advantage of automation. You don't. But it is the kind of lowest hanging fruit and the most impactful service for the businesses that are using that platform. And so why Microsoft 365? It's very easy to deploy. And we'll show you that as we get later in this presentation. I'm actually going to let you we'll do a live demo and I'll show you how quick and easy it can be to set up one of these automations. They can be very easy to use. What's beautiful about this platform is it doesn't have to be driven by your IT department, your IT director, or even your IT company. This has reached a level of simplicity, and I'll show you this in a minute, that I think most end users are going to be able to even consume, or at least play with and experiment with. It is not going to be one of those things that is sacred that can only be done or touched by IT people. It doesn't require programming knowledge. It doesn't require programming languages. It's a much more well-designed, accessible technology and platform. Now, that doesn't mean you can't make it complicated, because you can, and we'll show you some examples of that as well. But it does have a very low entry point to let people start to play with it and get familiar with it without having an advanced founder degree. And it's incredibly cost effective. If your organization is already using Microsoft 365, there's a very good chance the licenses you already own are going to provide most of the functionality that we're going to show you today. In other words, most of what we're going to show you is already being paid for by your current Microsoft licensing, which means that the only cost you would have is any investment you have in initially setting up or creating the technology, which, as I mentioned earlier, could be as little as your own staff doing it, or worst case scenario, you're partnering with a firm like us to come in and initially design this for you, but there's no ongoing licensing costs. There's no expensive software to buy. This is really well designed to be integrated in your current and existing subscriptions to Microsoft 365. So for those reasons, that is why we have especially focused on this platform. And again, I don't mean to say that the entire department is limited to just Microsoft 365 automation. For most of today, that's all we're going to talk about. And it is probably 80 to 90% of the work we're doing in our new productivity division of Paragus. So this is partly why we're looking at this. As we go deep into the Microsoft 365 platform, I don't know how many of these icons represent technologies you're currently using in your business right now. But as you can see on the screen, we've got all of these different pieces of Microsoft 365, from the kind of curating information to the social aspect of it, to the collaboration, to the communication, to the kind of more creative side of things, to the critical thinking. And what's beautiful about using the Microsoft platform is how all of these things can be interlinked and connected. That's what's got us so excited about this, is it's such a diverse and kind of rich catalog of programs. And as you use more and more of them, you create more and more opportunity for efficiency to be had, because you can create more and more linkages. And then beyond this, and I will show you this in a second, there are enormous amounts of integrations outside of the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. And that's not something Microsoft has historically been well known for. Microsoft typically likes to play in their own sandbox. However, they now have over 300 integrations with other very popular companies and software platforms and packages that pull in their technology, their systems, and their tools into the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. And we'll spend just a few minutes showing you kind of some examples of that. So the next thing I want to do is just talk about, when we say Microsoft 365 automation, what exactly are we talking about? So this slide does a pretty good job of just showing you some of the names and systems that we're referring to. At the very top level, I would consider that kind of where the data lives, where the thing is that we're trying to automate. You've got the Dynamics 365, which some businesses on this call might be using. It's a very common CRM system. It would be a competitor to like a Sales Hub or a HubSpot, and even Salesforce. So it's a complicated, very sophisticated backend system that can be leveraged to do all kinds of CRM, ERP, and even some accounting. Then you have Office 365. That's the one that probably the most people on this call are familiar with. That's where your email, your Excel, your Word, your SharePoint, your OneDrive, and your Teams live. A lot of the day-to-day applications that we're all clicking on and touching and using every day are in that Office 365 family. Then you have Microsoft Azure, or Azure, depending on who you're talking to. That's a platform which is designed to move all servers to the cloud. And you can consume it lots of ways. You can literally have an equivalent of a physical server spun up in Azure, or you can consume Azure as more of a service. For example, instead of having a server that has all of your usernames and passwords and things like that, you can also use it as a platform to provide that as a service to you, where you're subscribing to it as a monthly subscription instead of having to own a server, even a cloud server. And then you've got all of your business's apps and data. And this is what I was talking about with the plugins and integrations. There's lots of ways to pull in data from other systems into the ecosystem that are quite impressive. So that's kind of the platform source. Then we get into the automation layer. And there's really 4 products that we're going to talk about today. There's Power BI. We're not going to spend a lot of time on that on this call. We could do an entire call just on that topic. But Power BI is a great way to visualize data. Anybody who's opened up Microsoft Excel recently has probably seen a bar across the top from Microsoft saying, pro tip, you should check out Power BI. They're pushing this product very heavily right now. And to a certain extent, some features may already be included in your current Microsoft 365 licensing. But what Power BI is designed to do is to take data from lots of different data sources. It could be a SQL database, it could be an Access database, it could be an Excel spreadsheet, it could be a CRM system. And it allows you to pull that data into a dashboarding tool where you can create all kinds of dashboards that have different filters and layers and colors and graphics that can be scaled, sized, played with, and it makes it really easy to visualize information in your business. One of the things that we have to be very cognizant of is there's this big push for all of us to collect more and more data. There's this big data kind of surge going on. But having all that data is not very useful if we're not doing anything with it. What Power BI aims to do is to allow you to visualize that data and make all of that data much more useful to you. The next is Power Apps. Power Apps would be the more sophisticated version of the automation platform as compared to Power Automate. Power Apps is the one where you probably are going to be working with some sort of developer to build your Power Apps tool. And we're going to show you one example towards the end of this presentation of a Power App that we built at Paragus that allows us to do something very proprietary, and I'll show you what we mean by that. The next is Power Automate, and this is what we'll spend a lot of time on today. Power Automate is the more entry-level, easier automation platform, and this is the one where I can imagine almost anybody on this call setting up a Power Automate flow to do something for themselves if they have data and information already on the 365 platform. And then the newest kind of addition to the family is what's called Power Virtual Agents. And these are intelligent AI-driven interactive agents that you can build. And they can do all kinds of typical customer service or even internal service type functions. You could have an HR bot that automatically would look up information for your employees and provide them information that they need. You could create a customer-facing bot that would automatically answer common questions, provide information, and help self-serve customers. These are not your typical old school bots, though. The old school bots were basically a decision tree. These bots use actual intelligence, and they can be set up to sync up with lots of other data sources. So for example, if you synced it with whatever system you're using for your accounting, you could have a customer ask for a copy of an invoice. It could go into that accounting system, look up that invoice, and actually provide it to the customer. Way beyond what we traditionally would have thought of as an old school bot that was pretty rudimentary. The other thing is that the language skills of these has improved dramatically to the point that they are starting to get to that level of it may feel similar to the experience of actually talking to a human being, especially depending on who the human being you're talking to is and what the language barrier is and several other factors, it may actually be better. And so that's a fairly expensive tool. This is not included in most people's subscriptions, but these are the 4 tools that really represent what Microsoft considers to be their automation and intelligence platforms. And then just kind of below that are the data connectors, AI services, and common data services that are used to enable all of that. We don't need to worry too much about that. That's just kind of the backend systems that make all this possible. So now let's spend some time talking about Power Automate. So Power Automate allows us to take business applications, things in our workplace like our SharePoint or OneDrive. We can even pull in other applications, could be Oracle, it could be an IoT device, which is any device that's connected to the network. It could be data and AI coming from Power BI, SQL, or Excel. And it can be social media. It can link up with Twitter, with Facebook, with LinkedIn, with other platforms to pull in data. What you're doing there is you're creating linkages that say, if this, then that, or every time I do this, I want this. And you're building in these very simple or somewhat complicated kind of call and response types actions that can allow you to take what would have been a manual process and automate it. So let me show you an example. This is a scenario where, let's say that we wanted to build an automation that would handle when somebody wanted to join one of the teams in our organization. So let's just say, for example, you're using Microsoft Teams. Let's say there's one team called finance. And rather than having to IT call and manually add somebody to the finance team, you want to write a tool that automatically allows somebody to join that team. This is what that would look like. So the user would fill out a form. It could be a form internally, it could be on your website. You could put that form anywhere you wanted to. Once the form is filled out, that's what triggers what's called the flow. The flow is then going to use what's called an adaptive card, which is going to collect the information needed, and it's going to create what's called an approval tree. From there, it's going to either send that card to the approver to either be approved or rejected. If it's somebody who does not belong in the finance team, you would reject it, and it's going to generate an email to the employee that says, I'm sorry, you don't belong on this team, have a nice day. Or it gets approved. If it's approved, it can automatically go into the Active Directory services, confirm that that person is or is not a member of that team. If it is, it's going to send an email saying, hey, thanks for the request, but you're actually already a member of this team. If there's some confusion, please give us a call. If they're not already a member of that team, it can actually, on its own, add that member to that team and then email the original person and say, hey, congratulations, you've been added to the finance team. And this flow right here, just to give you some context, is probably 3 to 5 hours of work to set up one time. Once that is set up, from that point forward, the process of adding people to this particular team is now almost completely automated. All that's going to happen is somebody's going to fill out a form. Somebody else is going to get a Teams message saying, can I do this, yes or no? They're going to say yes or no. And everything else about the process is entirely automated. The emails, the communication, the actual adding and removing. And this is just one small example. Once you have this template built, you could then do it for other teams. You could have a remove from team tool, and you can start to experiment with this. So how do you decide if a process should be automated? These are the kind of 3 basic rules that we have found. One, it's repetitive in nature, something that you have to do with some level of frequency. Adding or removing employees, adding or removing customers, sending out quotes and invoices, approving certain requests, anything in your business that you do with some sort of repetitive nature. The steps are clear and consistent every time. In other words, there is a decision tree or a checklist or something that determines what you do that doesn't require a lot of thought or change. It doesn't, it's basically the same process every single time. And then finally, it's especially helpful to automate the ones where human errors can be very costly. For example, if you're manually putting in data into an invoice or manually sending out information to a customer and a decimal being in the wrong place or somebody accidentally copying and pasting the wrong thing could have a huge impact on the organization, that could make that system ripe to be automated just to remove the chance of that human error occurring. So what are some of the things that a business might want to automate? Well, you've got everything from appointment booking, approval processes, your management of your assets, collecting survey results, gathering teams information, email auto responses, scheduling employees, event registration, notifications and alerts, managing SharePoint data, keeping people informed and up to date, issues tracking and resolution, new employee onboardings, organizing email attachments, sales and lead assignments, social media activities, time off requests, to-do management, uploading and organizing files. This was just a quick list that some of us internally put together based on some of the things that we have already automated at our own business. This is not by any means an extensive list, but it gives you a sense of some of the types of business functions you may have in your own organization that might make sense to consider going through some level of automation. All right, so I'm going to pause here and actually show you guys some stuff. The first thing I'm going to show you is just what it looks like to click on the Microsoft automation platform. So when you first go to office.com and log in, this is the button you're looking for. It's the little blue arrow kind of pacing to the left. That is your Power Automate button. When you click on that, you're going to get brought to a screen that looks just like this. What I like about this is before I even start playing with the flows and automations I want to make, I'm presented with all kinds of templated automations that have already been written for me. So for example, let's say I want to get a push notification on my mobile device every time I receive an email from my boss. Or I want to save Office 365 email attachments to my OneDrive directory so I don't have to look them up in my email. And I want that to happen automatically. These are two examples of templates that have already been written for me that all I have to do is hit try it. It's going to load it up into my system, let me customize it a little bit, and then that's going to become an automatically live flow that is pretty much out of the box ready to go. Those are just two examples. I've got a bunch more right here that are kind of top picks, ones that a lot of people are using. I want to click a button to email a note. Let's say I have to send the same email 10 times a day. I want a button I can press that just says, send the email. Or let's say I want to get notified in Teams when a new work item is created. Or I want to post a welcome message when a new user joins a team. These are all the kinds of things that I can do. And then I can even look at like ones that are specifically geared towards remote work, ones that are specifically about email, notification ones where I want to save data to the cloud and make sure I'm not storing stuff locally on my computer, and then a whole group of automations just about approvals, common types of approvals that have to happen in an organization. So here's one: email yourself new tweets about a certain keyword, or I want to get a push notification when a file is added to OneDrive. There's just a pretty endless amount. And again, I'm not going to go through all of them right now. That would take a couple of days. But you can get a sense of the amount of kind of just easy out of the box stuff you can do. And you can search for keywords to start to kind of maybe hone in and find that template that you're looking for. Beyond that, you can also look for it by service. So for example, if I really am looking for all the templates that have to do with Twitter or Dropbox or Yammer, I doubt there's many people using Yammer, or Google Calendar, or even Slack, which is a Microsoft competitor, I can click on those things and see what types of automations have already been written for me that I can use as a starting point. There's also some really good information here about helping you to think about this and learn how to do it. There's kind of different guides and documents that will help kind of set you up for success and teach you a little bit about some of the things that are possible. So now what I want to do is I want to show you some of the ones that we have written that we have found to be helpful in our organization. So I'm going to go over to my flows, and these are just the ones that I happen to have written myself that do different things. The first one I'll show you is we have a mailbox where our clients are emailing us asking for help. We check that mailbox during certain hours, but after hours and on weekends and on holidays, we're not checking that mailbox. What we didn't want to happen was we didn't want a customer, maybe a brand new customer who's not exactly sure how it works, to email that mailbox, not get a response, and think that we got the message and we're ignoring them. So we wanted to have an out-of-office response that went to that user and told them, we got your message, but unfortunately, we're closed, it's the weekend or it's a holiday, and we're not going to get back to you until this day. And if it's more important and you need to get back to us right away, here's a phone number you can call if it's an emergency. Now, that's more complicated than your typical out-of-office responder, because your typical out-of-office responder is either on or off. Every single time we wanted to turn on, we'd have to remember to click it on. Inevitably, one night, somebody's going to forget and the whole thing falls apart. So what we wrote was this flow that would do it for us. And I'll just show you kind of what it looks like. This is on the more complicated side, but certainly not a super advanced application. So first we have the trigger. In this case, the trigger is when a new email comes into a specific mailbox that we have designated. And if I click on that, I can see exactly which mailbox I'm talking about. In this case, it's a mailbox that we call client support. So when a new mail comes in, this rule automatically gets triggered. The first thing it does is it goes and it pulls a list of holidays, We have created a list and telling it what days were open and closed at Paragus so that it can use that list. So the first thing it's going to do is go grab that list. Then it's going to check to see, is today a holiday? Then it's going to do some formatting for us that helps us determine, is today a weekday or a weekend? Then it's going to convert it to Eastern Standard Time so that we're not in Microsoft Universal Time. Then it's going to format that time to be 24 hours because that's how our flow works. So this is kind of the back end. And then you can kind of see what happens. So first, if it's from Paragus, we don't need to send a response. We know that we're closed. We don't need to tell ourselves that we're closed. So this first rule says if it's not internal, and it checks to see if the message is from Paragus. If it is, it doesn't do anything. If it isn't, it goes to the next step, which is called our day checker. The day checker says, is it Saturday or is it Sunday? If it is, then it's going to send the weekend reply. So an email that we have written to say, hey, this is a weekend, our office isn't open and we're not accepting calls. We'll see you on Monday morning. If this is an emergency, give us a call. If it's not a weekend, it's going to say, well, is it a holiday? It's going to pull that list of holidays and see, is today a holiday? If it is, it's going to send the holiday email. If it isn't, it's going to see what time of day is it. Is it after hours, before 8 in the morning, or after 5:30 at night? If yes, it's going to send our after hours email. If no, then you don't need to do anything because it's not a holiday, it's not a weekend, it's not after hours, which means there will be somebody to get that email and there's no reason to trigger or do anything. And so this is just one example of this flow here took approximately 3 hours to build, and some of that was a learning curve. It could have probably been done in less time. So this is the kind of thing that your organization, in a relatively short amount of time, could deploy and start to solve some business case or some need that you have. And once it's set up and done, it's done. There's no ongoing cost for this. I'm not paying for some service. I don't have to worry about, is it on or off? Did somebody forget to turn it on? It just runs all the time. I even get notified if it fails. There's a couple other quick examples. We run our company on something called an L10 system or an EOS system, which was made famous by a book called Traction. You don't need to understand that, but what you do need to understand is that every week we have very specific meetings. And for those meetings, we have a very specific agenda. One of the things that we do is we have an issues list where we keep track of everything that we need to talk about at that meeting. So what we did was we wrote some flows to help us manage all of these things. One example is we have a Teams channel where if I want to put something on an issues list on the agenda for the next meeting, I can simply put a message in that channel. And my flow here is going to automatically capture that issue and add it to our issues list. And I'll show you an example of what I mean by that. If I wanted to put something on the agenda for our marketing and sales team, I would add it here. We don't have a testimonials page on our brand new website. By putting that tilde, that is what triggered the flow to run. So I have a flow in here that says anytime a message is posted in this channel and it starts with a tilde, that's an issue. What it does is it takes that issue, it puts it on a list called an issues list, which is kind of like an Excel spreadsheet, but it's an online version of one. Says I'm the one who added it, the date that I added it, and exactly what my issue is. Then just to make sure that I know that it actually completed, it's going to post a reply to my message saying that I have successfully added your issue to an issues list so that I know that I don't have to worry about that issue anymore. It's going to be on the agenda for next month's meeting or next week's meeting. So that saves me some time. I don't have to remember to pull up the document, fill out the spreadsheet, put all my notes in, or God forbid, actually show up to the meeting remembering what it was I wanted to talk about. At any point in the week, whenever it crosses my mind, I just put it in the chat and I know that it's done, it's off my mind. On a similar note, we use this very same technology to track to-dos. In any given meeting, we're going to get to-dos assigned to us. We assign those to-dos using a system called Planner, which is a way to assign a task to somebody with a set deadline and a set assignment. These are all to-dos that need to get completed. When we add to-dos here, we also put them on a list so that we have one master list of every to-do that is open, closed, who's done it, who hasn't done it. And that all happens automatically. The other thing we realized is it would be really great to know when people finish their to-dos. So we wrote another automation that as soon as I go in and I check off a to-do has been completed, it posts in the channel that that to-do has been completed. So I had a to-do to ask somebody to order some mouse pads. I did that. And now, as soon as I checked that off, a message got posted in here to let everybody who was in that marketing and sales team know that to-do has been completed. And what this does is it just saves time and it improves communication. We're all on the same page. We all know exactly what's going on, but we're not depending on me to send somebody an email and them to open the email and check it. It just simplifies and organizes communication. Plus, there's this nice, easy thread where I can go back and look anytime I need to and see whether to-do was done or not. So those are some basic automations and flows. The next thing I want to do is I kind of want to kick it up a level and show you a couple of more advanced ones. The first thing I'll show you is the kind of genesis of what we call sharing Paragus points. And then I'm going to hand it over to one of our developers who's actually one of the employees working in this new division. And he's going to show you a pet project that he's been working on for a while now that is quite advanced. So the first thing I want to show you before I hand it over to Mike is we're very big on recognition and gratitude here at Paragus. So one of the things that we used to do is we used to have on our desks these little kind of paper banks. And inside them, we would put these little green coins that we called Paragus Points. And every partner would have a stash of Paragus Points. They look like this, these little plastic coins. And I got so many of these a month, and I could go around and put them in people's banks. And that was my way of showing my gratitude, was I could give them a Paragus point. And then we have a bank that we use to collect, and you can redeem things with Paragus Points, and there's all kinds of fun things. During COVID, obviously, we couldn't do this. Most of us were in the building. We couldn't walk around and put these coins in people's banks. So we had to think about how can we kind of bring this online. And so one example of an automation that we wrote was we created a channel in Teams called Drop a Point. What I can do is anytime I post and drop a point, it's going to automatically recognize who posted and who they're showing their gratitude to. It's going to capture that. And then it's going to go into our backend system and actually record that a point has been transferred from this person to this person. And that allows us to recognize people in a virtual world, but also in a remote world where maybe our employees are in different offices, different places, different time zones, different times of the day, and still have that same kind of connection that we used to have from literally walking around and dropping points in banks. However, that was kind of our beta version, maybe even our alpha version of digitizing this program. What I'm going to now do is hand it over to Mike, who's going to show you a much more advanced version that he's been working on. So Mike, I'm going to go ahead and make you a co-host, and then I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and you should now be able to share yours.
All right. Everybody see my screen now? Awesome. So what I've been building is what I call the partner portal. One main thing that it does right now is it tracks everything to do with Paragus Points. So in this app, we can redeem our points, we can track our balance, we can see all the transactions and the status of them. We can drop points and gratitude messages for everyone and post them automatically to Teams. Just everything to do with Paragus Points can be done from this one spot. So what this is on my screen here is an app built in Power Apps. And this app can be run on a mobile device. It can be run in a web browser, on a desktop, in Microsoft Teams, pretty much anywhere you want to use it. So that partners have access to this wherever they are at any time. While this is built in Power Apps, behind the scene, I have a whole slew of Power Automate flows that are running behind the scenes to make everything possible. So this is kind of like what you can do once you get a little more deep into it, start using Power Apps to connect everything together. I'm just going to show you what you can do in here. So right at the top of our main page here, we have our Paragus Point balance. You can see it's customized to me with my name up here. If I want to spend some points, I can go into here. I can choose a reward, which behind the scenes, we have some lists stored in SharePoint with all the rewards you can get and its prices and everything. So this is pulling that into here to give us some options. And we can look at what we can spend our points on. Of course, I do want to buy some lunches with Delcy. Maybe force them to go on like 10 lunches with me. I can continue, and it'll give me a little breakdown of what I am spending my points on, what my new balance is going to be, and then I can go ahead and confirm that. Give me a little welcome message, and what's that going to do is that's going to send it behind the scenes over to management. They're going to see an approval, and they're going to give me my lunches with Delcy and schedule them. If you go back to the main page here, I can also transfer my points. Say I owe someone a lot of points for doing something, I don't know. I can go in here and choose one of the partners. Maybe I'm Bruce. I know he's doing a lot for everybody. So I'm going to go ahead and award him 10 points for my balance. It's going to give me a breakdown, and I'm going to send it over. Go back to the main page here. Delcy was talking about how we had those physical Paragus points. We had an allowance every month so we could drop them in people's boxes. We would have like 7 points a month that we could do that with. And we wanted to replicate that digitally here. So now we have a balance of 7 that it shows here. And we have this option to drop points. This isn't necessarily from our own balance, but from the bank. So if we go into drop here, we can kind of give gratitude to someone just to drop them a Paragus point. So again, we choose who we want to send it to. We can type a reason in here, and we can post it to Teams automatically. So everyone in the company can see why we gave someone these Paragus points. And then I have this nifty little drop down arrow so you can actually drop the Paragus point, and then it'll send it away. And then you can see down here, you can see all the transactions that I already have in their statuses down here. I'm going to open it up big for you. You can see every Paragus point transaction that I've done here, sending points to people. The redemption I just sent for Delcy hasn't been approved yet, so it's showing that it's still pending approval here. And it kind of gives you an in-depth list of everything you've done there. And our goal here is to use it for Paragus points, but also we've just built an app that we can expand and put other partner things in, like time requests or tracking inventory. Anything we can think of can now be built in this platform. That's pretty much all I got with this, Delcy.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike, so much. If you want to just end your screen share, I'll take it back from you. Perfect. The screen too. So again, the point here isn't to suggest that each of you is going to go out and build your own points tool, not that you couldn't, but it's more just to give you a sense of what are some of the things that are possible and kind of the spectrum of options that are available. From very simple things like every time my boss emails me, put a push notification on my phone that says, hey, you just got an email from your boss, to much more complicated things like managing an internal currency system and offering different options for redemptions. So where do you go from here? Well, that's exactly what we want to end our presentation today talking about. So first, you want to think about, are there things in your business that could make sense to fit into this automation classification? So are there tasks that you find tedious or repetitive? Do you find that there's processes that are too time consuming that you wish your staff weren't spending as much time on? Is there something that everyone is doing differently that causes problems? I know we had a lot of those. Are there processes that are not being completed consistently? Maybe they get halfway through and then it falls off the radar. And is there anything that isn't being tracked that should be? For example, employees requesting upgraded equipment or new hires being onboarded, invoice approvals, expense accounts. Is there anything in your business that isn't being tracked that could be and should be, and if it was, it would provide some value? Those are designed to be some of the things you can be thinking about. And we already shared with you earlier a whole bunch of other ideas to kind of get you in that mindset and get you thinking. From there, we want you to know that you're not alone. This is an entire focus of ours now. We've created an entire division at Paragus, the fourth pillar of IT, dedicated to helping with these services. Whether that's teaching you the tool set, whether that's building the tools for you, whether it's just helping you to understand what's possible, we're definitely here to help. So the first thing that we often see is, where do we start? This all sounds exciting. This sounds interesting, but I've got a lot on my plate. I'm very busy. How do I get started with this thing? Well, as most people who are very busy, it can be very confusing to figure out where is going to be the most time consuming. What's the most beneficial? Do I even have time to tackle this? What am I going to have to know? How many resources is this going to consume? And it can become very overwhelming. Some people are just still very confused about this topic. Even after this presentation, they still don't quite understand what we're talking about. They're not quite sure that they know what we're referring to. So from that perspective, what we want you to do is think of us as your Sherpas. We're here to help you every step of the way, from identifying possible candidates to be automated, to doing the heavy lifting of writing the automation, to training your staff on actually rolling it out. So the first is helping you identify automation candidates. We can help look at manual systems in your business, manual processes, things that you're tracking maybe on Excel spreadsheets or through emails, and help identify some really easy use cases for some intro early automations. From there, we'll map out how it's going to work. So we'll do some visual diagrams to show you what are those flows going to be. Kind of like at the beginning of this presentation, I showed you that flow for adding a user to the finance team. We can visualize the flow for you so you can get a sense of what the different steps are going to be and how it's going to work. From there, we'll actually write the backend for you. So we can do all the programming and the flows and the automations and write all that for you, including starting to bring in some of the third-party services, whether that be integration with Salesforce or HubSpot, whether that mean bringing in a SQL database, pulling in data maybe from some other places that maybe you can't kind of on your own pull that data into your system. And then once it's all done, there's a training component. We want to make sure that everybody on your team knows how the system works, how to use it, what the different buttons do, what to click on, what not to click on, what to expect. And we can help provide that training to your team so they're truly empowered to use this new technology. And then finally, you want to track the data to make sure it's all working. Once you've got this all set up, you want to have good dashboards and analytics that show you, okay, if we're tracking, let's say, for example, employee requests to upgrade their equipment. How many requests have there been? What stage are they in? Were they approved or denied? If they were denied, why were they denied? We want to start to visualize this data because that's one of the benefits of putting it into these systems. And then finally, we're here to help you make it all work. Oftentimes, customers have ideas or problems, and that's about as far as they get. We want our customers to come to us with those ideas and problems and let us help them to figure out what technology, tools, solutions, systems might there be to address that problem or to take advantage of that opportunity or idea that you've come up with. All right, and with that, I'm going to officially open it up for questions. I'm happy to take questions from anybody. As I said earlier, you can unmute, you can post in the chat, whatever works for you. But if there's anything people want to know more about, we are happy to, of course, answer it. Somebody did message and say, what are the additional costs for some of these services? It's a tricky question. Sometimes, as I mentioned earlier, it's already included in your Microsoft 365 subscription. It's going to depend a little bit on what subscription you have and what you want to do. There are some services, for example, the one Mike showed you with that kind of very complicated Paragus Point tool. Something like that actually did require us to buy a couple of additional licenses that cost $15 to $20 a month above and beyond what we were already spending. We didn't buy one for every single user. We only had to buy one. But that kind of gives you a sense that there are going to be times when you have to spend a little bit more. Another good example is that kind of chat bot that I talked about at the very beginning. That's a very expensive technology. That's going to be hundreds of dollars a month if you want to put something like that to use. But if you have a use case where you're reducing your staff count by one, or you're really dramatically kind of automating something that was otherwise manual, there very well may be an ROI there. Somebody in the chat asked, what resources do we recommend to learn Power Automate and flows? So there's lots of good stuff. One, we're always happy to provide some kind of individual or group training. Two, there are YouTube videos. Three, right on that Microsoft website that we clicked on, if you scroll down a little bit, there starts to be some tutorials and shows that will kind of show you how to build them. What I usually recommend is start with a template and then dissect it and try to customize it and play with it from there. It can be hard to stare at a blank canvas and just figure out how do I get started. But if you start with one of those templates where there already is something built out and then you want to tweak it and change it, it's a great way to learn and play with it. Somebody else, how can we figure out what's included in Office 365? You can Google it. If you know what plan you're on, small business, premium, E5, E1, X5, if you know what plan you're on, you can Google what's included in E5, and you're going to probably get a pretty good article or list. You also can ask. We're obviously always happy to answer that question and tell you what's included, or more importantly, if you tell us what you're trying to do, we can tell you whether or not it is included. The other thing you can do is just go to office.com and click. If the button is there, it's included. There's not going to be any surprises. Microsoft's not going to let you do something that you're not paying for. In order to add something into your portfolio or into your kind of ecosystem, an IT administrator has to go and set it up. So if you see it, it's there. If you don't see it and you want to know how much it would cost to add it, that's when you can reach out and ask. Somebody asked, does everyone need to run 365 or can some users stay with Office? That's a great question. It really depends on what you're trying to do. From a purely licensing standpoint, you can mix and match as much as you want. So if you want to buy some standalone Office, or you already have them and you don't want to convert everybody right now, you can start to buy 1 or 2 licenses. You also can buy Microsoft 365 licenses that don't include the desktop applications, where you're saving some money and getting some of the cloud features and some of the cool stuff, but not duplicating the cost of buying a Microsoft Office if you already own it. And then maybe when that version gets a little bit older, maybe you decide, you know what, now I want to get it. And so I upgrade to the more expensive plan, and now I get the brand new version of Microsoft Office. There are, last time I checked, 97 different Microsoft Office SKUs. And that's a number that grows all the time. So there's a million ways to mix and match different licenses and platforms across your staff. And you can mix and match. You could have 5 people on E1 and 2 people on E3 and 1 person on E5. You really can play with it and decide what you want. And any licenses that we sell are always month to month, meaning at any point in time, you can change them. You have some employees that you need to that leave or that were seasonal, you can reduce your licenses. You have somebody who wants to go to a more expensive package, you can change it. You have a lot of control of being able to kind of play with your licensing on a month-to-month basis. Those were all the questions in the chat. Is there any other questions before we wrap up today? Well, I just want to thank everyone for tuning in. We're obviously very excited about this. We've been working on it for months, and we're super excited to finally be able to announce this 4th division of Paragus and all the services and products that will come with it. We will, of course, be continuing to send out messaging and communication over the coming months and years as we develop this further. But if there is a request that you have to start looking at this, working on it, playing with it, please do not hesitate to reach out. We would be excited and eager to help you with that. Otherwise, I appreciate you all tuning in, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and a rest of your week.